My name is Charles Ellsworth Klinger. I was born in Brackenridge Hospital here in Austin on the 4th of December 1930. We lived, that's my parents right here. This guy, Carl Ernest Klinger, he was born and raised in Del Valley, Texas. And my mother was Amy Cox. She was actually born in West Virginia. Came to Texas with her family in 1911 and wound up here in Austin. I think when I was born, I'm not exactly sure if we lived. I'm only interested in South Austin and the Travis Heights area. I was born and raised in South Austin. I've lived all my life in South Austin. I have no interest in North Austin except the cemeteries on that. And in the Travis Heights area, basically east of Congress Avenue. I can recall in, say, 1930, 31, maybe 32, living in 1505 South Congress. That's on the east side. It's just a little north of the Congress Avenue Baptist Church. In 1933, my parents bought a lot, 1704 Alameda Drive in Travis Heights area. They built the house there for $2,500. It was a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. Monthly payment was $25 a month. You got to realize 1930 was a Depression era. A lot of turmoil was going on in the war. The Chinese were fighting each other. Latter part of 1930, Japanese invaded Manchuria and China. Italy was after Ethiopia. Balkans was in turmoil. They were beginning to have a little disturbance in Europe with Germany. And so we had a depression in the early 1930s. FDR then put everybody to work on CCC, but when they completed their jobs in parks, they didn't have a job anymore. So we went back into another depression in the 1937 and 38 period. But about that time, everybody knew there was going to be a fight, a war in Europe, so he then ordered a lot of automobile plants and other plants up in the east that had been closed down to start building tanks and military equipment. So he put people back to work at that particular time. My dad worked for the Texas Highway Department. He was a civil engineer, professional civil engineer, and made about $500 a month. And that was a very excellent salary here in the city of Austin. You got to realize Austin at that time was basically a government town and a UT and a school, UT. St. Edward's was schooling. Bread was 12 cents a loaf. So monthly payment for the house was $25 a month. So my father was pretty well off at that time. I had a sister. She was born in 1933. Margie Amy Klinger Ferris. She's deceased. She's buried in Oakwood Annex also. But it was Fulmore Junior High, had grades 1 through 8th. And so we started school, and I went from 1 through 8th at Fulmore Junior High School. I lettered in basketball. I'm the type of kid, though, that is always in motion. I'm not really a student except in history. I like history and math, somewhat in art, but mostly history and math and psychology, particularly human psychology. Behavioral science is what they call it nowadays on that. But I had a first grade teacher named Mrs. Cunningham. She was a beautiful old lady, you might say, but she was a wonderful teacher. She also, I had dust erasers a lot of times after school because of my discipline problems on that. As far as the ninth grade, it was Allen Junior High, and I think that's where the Baptist Church is now located. That was just 1 year. I lettered in football there, and then they had 3 years at Austin High School on Rio Grande. I think I lettered mostly in tennis. As I said, I was a kid in motion. Blunt, Bulunn Creek was right behind my parents' home. It was thick, underbrush, big, you could swing on vines across. There were snakes, crawdads and so forth like that. It's like it today, it's all clean and it's real nice. But I knew every spot from Stacy Pool almost to Stacy Park. And I loved it. I loved to go down there. I didn't have any boys really to play with at that time. Fortunately, there was none of them in there. Those that were in the neighborhood some of them were Catholics, and they went to St. Ignatius. So I grew up basically with two young ladies. That was a group. I love to be outdoors. I wasn't one to sit in a house and read a book, read a newspaper. I scanned papers, I scanned books, and I still do that. At almost 91 years of age, I still scan things. And then if I like it, then I'll read it. I like it. But I loved to go down to the park. I went down to the Blunt Creek. I had certain trees that I would climb, and I would sit in kind of like Gandhi, sit with a leg across, and try to figure out why people acted like they do. I knew about the situation in Europe, knew about the situation in Asia. You could hear it on the news. The best news came from the San Antonio Express paper. The Austin paper was socialistic then, like it's socialistic now. I still to this day, I love trying to study people and why they behave in such a manner. I did my mother was a Methodist. We didn't attend church. I attended United Methodist Church on East Monroe because some other kids were there that I knew. I had a bad habit though. Instead of walking in the front door, there was a tree on the west side of the church. I would climb the tree and slip through the windows to my classroom. I liked the Sunday school teacher. He was an elderly man, and he could answer some of my questions. As far as the preaching, just like today, you hear one sermon, that's all you have to hear. They're all the same. They're all the same. I was encouraged to join the United Methodist Church because my mother was it. She didn't encourage me, but everybody. And I remember walking down the aisle of the church, and the minister was swinging this little pot, smoke back and forth, and he said, "You will drown in a devil's hole, deep hole, and you shall rise." I said, "Whoa, buddy. Just drop it down into the deep hole. It's not for me." I turned around, walked out the front door, and every Sunday thereafter I played tennis at Stacy Park. We didn't get along too well on that. I liked Stacy Park down there. They had a little ballpark where we could play football, touch football down there. Had a little baseball. I took piano lessons for a number of years. I like classical music. I never could get into pop music. I just didn't have a feel for that. But I could feel classical music, My sister was just the opposite. She was zilked on classical music, but she loved the pop music. But I played a lot of solos at Stacy Park, a lot of duets there, and Knights of Columbus all over the city of Austin with a lady named Janet Boyd a lot of time. Then I enjoyed playing, but it was always classical music, and duets were classical music. When I got at Fulmore, I liked music. I joined a band there. I wore braces for almost 10 years. I had an overbite. I wanted to play the horn, but with my braces, I couldn't press against that, so I played the clarinet. So I was in a band at Fulmore Junior High School and probably 1 year at Austin High School. During my early years, say the 1930s and so forth, you walked everywhere, or maybe bike. On the weekends, we had several movies downtown. There was the Paramount Theater, the State Theater, the Queen Theater, Capitol Theater, Ritz, and Cactus. The Paramount Theater was exclusive. State, I was in there several times. One story is that my girlfriend and eventually my wife, she wanted to go see Gone with the Wind, Clark Gable, whatever. And I can remember we had to sit down. I went to sleep on it. I enjoyed the music, but I thought Clark Gable was not the right guy. The only person that was good was Olivia de Havilland. And whoever that black lady is that was a maid. I thought they were good actors. The rest of them, but I didn't. I can still remember dozing off, and my wife, or girlfriend, Mary, she would nudge me, wake up, like that. And when I was, in 10 years old or something like that, I would mow lawns around my neighborhood. $25 for just to mow the front yard. It was a push mower. We had a heavy push mower. And they paid me anywhere from $25 to 50 cents maybe $1 and I like to trim. I love to do yard work, but I do it my way and my time. I could earn maybe about $1.50 to $2 on a Saturday morning, change clothes, and then walk from my house in Travis Heights to the Ritz Theater on 6th Street, 200 block of 6th Street. There, for a nickel, for $1, I can see a cowboy double feature. I can see a weekly serial, the Green Hornet, Green Lantern, stuff like Victor Jory, and a cartoon. Hershey chocolate bars had real chocolate in it, not like it is today, was for a nickel, and a drink was for a nickel. So for less than 25 cents, I could spend an hour and a half, 2 hours watching cowboys. I enjoy watching Buck Rogers, Charles Starrett, those old actors. John Wayne wasn't around at that particular time like that. So, but I like that action deal. The Queen Theater, I enjoy the Queen Theater to some degree because they still had murder mysteries. I can remember when the Wolfman first came out. And to make this scene real interesting, the director would have Lon Chaney as an adult, and he would wake up and he'd run with his back to the camera. And then he'd stop, and then he'd turn real quick, and then all of a sudden there was that Wolfman. A boy named Alan Smith and I went to see that first movie, and sitting in front of us was one of the girls who was in there, Irene Weaver, and some of her friends. And just as the Wolfman turned around, I touched Irene. And man, you heard her scream. And she just shook like that. And said, Ellsworth. Yeah. But I liked the Queen Theater and the Ritz Theater. I don't know if I was ever in the State Theater, but they were romantic novels where they didn't have a lot of action in it. There was a lot too many love scenes, I guess. I don't know what it was. The Capitol Theater, it had 3 tiers. We got to go to the second tier, but those movies they didn't come. I had to have something that had action, moving like that. The cowboy movies, I always liked looking at it. One thing about it, I learned right quick, like the cowboy movies in those days, to extend the time, they'd have long chasing a runaway stagecoach or chasing after the cowboy. And I always would look in the distance, see if I could see telephone lines way on top of that mountain or maybe a little plane fly across there. Every once in a while you could see a telephone line way in the distance back there. So I was inquiring about that. But like I said, I was a kid in motion. We didn't have air conditioning. You open the windows during the summer, and you had some fans. We had a 2-bedroom, 1-bath house. It was built in 1933. In 1940, around early part of 40s, my dad added 2 extra rooms in the back. One of them was my bedroom, and one of them was what we call a pine room. That was really my mother's sewing room. My mother could sew and crochet. I always think about my mother. When I was born, she always said, I don't know how to raise a kid. So for about 3 years, I was raised by a black lady named Dora. And she actually raised me and taught my mother how to raise a kid like that. But at night, as I say, we didn't have air conditioning. Finally, they came to install what's called water coolers. And basically, you just put a filter here and then have water run down and hope the wind would. And you try to put a fan that could blow it in. They only had one of that, and it went from the bedroom into the living room. The problem with that, it put moisture in the air, and most houses at that time had wallpaper. Well, after a while, the wallpaper started falling, deteriorating about that. My dad retired from the highway department in 1955. He then went to work for what's called Bureau of Public Roads to the federal government highway department. The United States and China were competing with other countries to build roadways and publicity. So my dad, he was not a designer, he was more of an administrator. So he and my mother went to the Philippines for 2 years where they worked with, even with some of the rebels over there. And then they went to Iran for a couple of years where he had a heart attack and had to come back home after that. But at that time, that's where, when my dad left, he said, Ellsworth, I'd like for you to live here. It was 1955. But I had two kids about that time. So I put an air conditioning unit in. And my dad, he was totally afraid of fires. He didn't understand air conditioning. And I just said, I'm going to put an air conditioning in. And the house had it was built on a slope. So we had a lot of from the floor and the bed as a rock, because the house up here and the land sloped like this. And he was afraid of fires on that. But anyway, he had to live with it after a while. We during the war, we had rations. You had your bread, your meat was rationed, your gasoline was rationed. You only could purchase so much meat, very little meat. I went to school at Fulmore lots of time with 2 sandwiches of mashed beans, mayonnaise and mashed beans, and that was all right with me. Or we had a victory garden at Pitch and Putt. It'd be located now about the 8th hole where Pitch and Putt is now located. We raised green beans, onions, and some other things. My mother learned to can a lot of that stuff. One day, all the men left and left me in charge of hoeing the garden like this. Well, they didn't leave me any water, didn't leave me any food. So I got kind of hungry. I pulled up one of those onions and I started eating the onion. And the only thing they had was beer. And I drank some of that beer, then threw up. But I Never. That's probably the only time I ever drank alcohol. Never been a smoker. My dad was a heavy smoker, but he never smoked in the house. He always went outside. And she reminded me here of the 1935 flood. There's pictures of the flood here in Austin. At that time, you had the Austin Dam. At that time, we called it Tom Miller Dam. It wasn't able to hold the water. There was no such thing as a Longhorn Dam. The Colorado River from the dam, Tom Miller Dam, all the way down through Bastrop was just, sometimes was wide, sometimes it could be not any wider than that entrance right there. So it was almost like a creek, you might say. But the 1935 flood came, and you could cross from South Austin to North Austin one of three ways: Congress Avenue Bridge, the Railroad Bridge, or go down the Metropolis Bridge. That's the only way. Congress Avenue, the Railroad Bridge was built real high, so it wasn't affected by the flood. Congress Avenue Bridge was wiped out. A lot of the water lines that were built across the Colorado River, and they broke. So we in South Austin did not have water. At Stacy Pool, there's an artesian well. And we get these big old, at that time they were glass cylinders. Now it's all plastic cylinder, big ones. And I take my wagon and with my mother, and we walk up to the artesian well, fill that up, take it back. You smell it to high heaven, but then you let it sit for a couple of days to kind of get the smell out. Then you could have water to drink. I always thought, as a kid, that was quite an adventure anyway, to go up. But I can still remember, I can shut my eyes, still remember seeing the flood. Parents took me down to Congress Avenue, just about where the south line of the deaf school is. And that's about where we still, I can remember looking out and seeing all that massive amount of water. My dad had a service station. He attended a Texas Coast service station. It was wiped off. There was a lot of those small cabins along Riverside Drive that got wiped out. Everything was gone. Was just completely wiped out. But I can still remember seeing that. To me, as a kid, I was in awe about the water going over. My dad saw it from a different point of view, the destruction of property and things. But there's no way he could get to work. A lot of people tried to cross the railroad bridge, but the railroad people wasn't too happy about that on that deal. Oh, it's interesting when we were playing football for Allen Junior High. We'd go and play at the against deaf school, and it's always interesting because they couldn't hear, but they would in their huddle do their sign language to call certain play, and in the way that you could hear them come to the line of scrimmage and go and stuff. That's where they did it count. We're going to go on 3 or go 4, but they were tough rascals. They were mean. We also played against a high school at St. Edwards. And that school football field was nothing but just a bed of rocks. Nobody knew what grass was on that field, but it was just like a bed of rocks. And that's why Alameda Drive, where I grew up in, we had curbs, but it was gravel street. Finally, the city one day came by and said, "We'll pave this for you if you will pay for your half to pay for it." Everybody in the neighborhood paid for it except my neighbor across from where we lived. He said, "Nah, I'm not going to pay." He was hoping, he'd have a gravel place in front of his house. Everybody else would have pavement in front of their house. He was, my neighbors will take care of me. It didn't. He eventually had to do it himself. like that. The Iceman. It was always interesting about the Iceman. We used, well, most people, we had a refrigerator, but a lot of houses around our neighborhood had ice boxes. And they'd have the Iceman deliver 25-pound or 50-pound blocks of ice like that. And milk was delivered to the house at that particular time like that. Well, many a nights I would sleep out in the summer, particularly on the front yard, and I would, look at the stars, meditate about behavioral science, you might say. And neighbors had a chow dog, and that chow dog would always come and sleep with me, like that. But then when I got a room for myself, even when they added on to the house in the back, I still went outside. I just was not a houseboy. They had the radio. We didn't have such thing as TVs. Radio. I liked things like Lone Ranger, or Jack Armstrong, the All-American Boy, action, The Phantom Strikes. I wasn't into Fibber McGee and Molly and the comedies, you might say, like that. Saturdays was always a football, and then the fall was always a football game. And there was the best football announcer, even today, was a guy by the name of Kern Tips. He talked about the football game. He didn't talk about himself or about other players or promote like that. But he could anticipate a lot. But I always enjoyed. My dad would turn up the radio and I'd stay outside throwing the football or doing something outside. And but he was a good player. My wife, named Marilyn Richardson at that time. Her family eventually moved to South Austin. They eventually built a house across. We lived at 1704 Alameda Drive. The Richardson built a house in 1707. During the war, I think sometime about 3 or 4 of her aunts slept in the same bedroom that Marilyn did. Marilyn had a separate bedroom. She had a brother that slept in the same bedroom as her parents. But the bed, about 3 or 4 aunts and Marilyn all slept in one big, small bedroom like that. They spoiled the girl, Marilyn. They would do the cooking, they would do the sewing, they would all that. And so she took up reading. She was very smart. But she was not, her mother was pretty restrictive on her. She would rarely let Marilyn cross the street to visit with my sister, Margie. Occasionally, the girls would sleep together. They would tell their wild tales about, where would they talk about? Occasionally, Margie, I don't think ever went over there. But occasionally, Marilyn. And one day my sister said, there's one of these girls in the neighborhood that says, you sure got nice looking legs. And I thought, well, who is that? Well, that's Marilyn. I said, she's not a tomboyish or anything, I really hadn't paid much attention to her. So I said, well, that might be kind of interesting. I never had anyone feel like they would compliment me on that. So I started just talking with her. She wound up, I guess, she's the only girl I ever truly dated. I was the only boy she ever truly dated. Okay. And when I was 15 years old and she was 13 years old, I gave her a bracelet with my name on it. That's what's called pin. Your pin now, like that. So you can shout to everybody, look, I got a bracelet, I'm pinned to Ellsworth, like that. And so I was 15, she was 13. And from that time to the time we got married in 1952, we were either pinned or engaged. I just wanted to be with her. She's the only person really that I felt like took an interest in me. I was tall, I was big. Since 1945, I hadn't weighed less than 200 pounds. And I was always a compromising person. I only had one fight in my life as on school grounds. But it's always as a kind of compromising people. And everybody, they called me Bubba. I was kind of known in the neighborhood as Bubba. Go talk to Bubba about your problem, like that. And I enjoyed that. I felt like I was contributing something. But nobody was interested in me. I did not have a close relationship with my dad. I did with my mother. She kind of understood me. But at the same time, even though my dad and I did not have that type of relationship, he secretly did a lot for me for going to Texas A&M. He wrote a lot of letters. I found out much later, after he died, and I read some of his letters. He wrote a lot of letters to Texas A&M, spent some tuition, even though I worked in the summer like that. He was very caring, extremely caring to other people. He'd drive to Gonzales to State Hospital down near Gonzales. And he would visit people in the hospital. He's part of the Ben-Hur Shrine. But he never taught me how to drive. He never taught me how to use a hammer, how to use a rifle, to clean a rifle. It was just here. Now, my sister, he got along, they like to argue with each other. And I'm not a person who argues. That's just a waste of time like that. My mother, she had a calming effect on me. If I got PO'd about something, she, elsewhere, just calm down here. Let's talk about it like that. But I felt like, nobody really was interested in me, my feelings about things. I had to cure you, but nobody was. Oh, you seem to be happy and going all the time. But she got my sister and my dad. They love to talk politics and other things, but I didn't care. I didn't care about that because you don't have results. In 1948, after I graduated from high school, then I entered Texas A&M. I went down there. I liked the military. There was something about a comradeship that I thought was interesting. We played cowboys and Indians all the time, but a lot of times we would play soldiers, particularly during World War II, have your little tin helmet, and I always kind of felt like there was a comradeship with a group of people like that. But I went to A&M and played freshman football. My roommate and I, Tuffy Chandler, we played football down there from the freshman year. But I wasn't dedicated that much. But I found military education very exciting, very interesting. Tactics and things of this nature like that. During the 30s and some in the 40s, there was a lot of Aggies who worked for the highway department. And when Texas would play A&M at A&M, we'd all get on a train, and everybody would ride the train to College Station. Now, College Station was a one-horse town. It had maybe one or two buildings, and then there was a school. That was it. A&M was all military, and I would go along. My dad would take me along with him, and I would walk around the campus. I really wasn't interested in the game. I wanted to see the campus. I like the uniform. I like the way they seem to be good buddies with each other. I like the marching, the drills, and the cannons that were around there. That's pretty good, pretty good. But really, when I first went down there, I wasn't too sure what I wanted to do with my life. But I found I made straight A's in military science. I can't say that for some of my other grades. Between your junior year and the senior year at A&M, you went to a 2-week summer camp. You were required to go to 2 weeks. And I went to Fort Hood. Now, I can remember to this day sitting in the barracks one evening after a meal, shining my shoes, had other people around me from different parts of the United States. And I can still remember looking out in the west, and the sun was setting. And I thought, this is a very warm, comforting feeling. Here I got food, I got medical, and I got good friends around me. I was thinking about, losing an arm or dying or something like that, but it was just the comradeship that came up. And I thought that I can still feel that warmth in me, a very pleasant feeling like that. But then I got to thinking, well, wait a minute now. I got a girlfriend in Austin. And I found greater comfort in being with her than being with the other guys like that. So she won out. If you're going to be in the military, you got to have a wife who was military oriented. And she would have gone wherever I would have gone, if I wanted to stay in. When I was in Korea, when I got ready to leave Korea, they gave me a choice of going to Okinawa, becoming an instructor there, and battles, stuff like it, or coming back to Fort Bliss, Texas. If I was single, I'd have gone to Okinawa, which was a junk island anyway at that time. But we were married at that, and I didn't want to expose it. A lot of people said, don't bring her to go to Okinawa. My wife grew up around a very close-knit family, particularly with her grandparents. So I did not want to break that up. I admired that. I admired that very much. Didn't quite understand it because my grandparents died in 40 and 41. And I was just 9 or 10 years old, so I never had a relationship with either my mother's parents or my dad's parents. But she had grandparents that I knew quite well, and they were wonderful people. One down in Bastrop, they were great people down there. But I just kind of felt like what my wife would like to have is a little house, raise kids, have a white picket fence around your house, and be close to her family like that. Forget about my desire, my needs, and so forth. This is what I felt was important to her. Okay, so I stayed in. I got discharged in 1958. I went back in the service in '58. I didn't like at Fort Hood. I didn't like the way the politics that got involved in '58. This group had just returned from Germany, and I didn't care for the politics in there. I was supposed to go on and call on the general's wife because I was a new lieutenant on the base. And I told the captain, I said, the general's wife wants to see me. She can come and see me, or she can send a note. But I'm just not going to walk in on her like that. So, bullheadedness maybe, but no, I wasn't going to be pushed around like that. I found a loophole in the military regulations. One little sentence in a big thick book like that, and said if you do not take the confirmation oath of office, when I went back in, you have to take the oath of office. I did not take the oath of office. That would come later. But it says, if you do not take the confirmation oath of office, you shall be discharged at the conclusion of congressional. I wrote that out. I refused to take the confirmation oath, and I will start processing my papers. So when in the congressional session in Washington, D.C., I want to say, adios, like that. That upset the people in San Antonio, which was headquarters of the 4th Army area. That upset people in Washington, D.C. They had never heard of that. I said, it's there. You read it? Yeah, it's there. But we never had anybody do that before. But I had 2 captains in Fort Hood. They did the same thing. They got out the same way. Yeah. There was one captain who kept getting on my case all the time. He kept harassing me like that. So I told the sergeant, I said, as soon as I get that confirmation oath of office that I'm in discharge, I'm coming looking for that captain, and I'm going to whip his butt right here on the forehead. So I did. I went looking for him, told the sergeant. He said he had left the post. So I never saw anything about it like this. But I went to work for the highway department. I found a good job. I went to right-of-way division. About that time, they were starting to build the interstate system. I handled relocate. When you build a highway, you have to buy land. You have to buy houses, farms. That was the real estate people. But there's also utility lines that have to be adjusted. Your pipelines, water lines, your electric lines, your telephone lines, and cables and stuff like that. That was the section I was in. And that was completely new. So I enjoyed developing something new like that. I enjoyed the engineering part of that. I really enjoyed the laws that were part of that. I guess I went to Washington, D.C. at least 4 or 5 times to speak about my understanding of the law, the federal law. Federal law is one thing. It's the making of the law. I said, that's what federal law says. But the making of the law is what you need to read. To say, what did these people say when they were talking about making this law? This is what was their intent, not what you have pulled, what the intent is of the law. You did something totally different for your situation. That's not what the original author said. I wasn't exactly a favorite person, but I love to argue with politicians.